What does a bathtub full of bubble gum in the end zone have to do with getting Nebraska football back to a bowl game? We're pulling out all the stops next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase.
Okay. Welcome in. Good morning. It is Thursday. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone in Omaha is here with me. As always, we've got a mailbag show for you today. Lots of questions. Somewhat disappointed viewers with the YouTube questions today. We had a comment that we are just rolling a turd in sugar, looking for any shred of hope as it relates to Nebraska football. Not much else of substance in the YouTube comments, but thankfully we have email. And the inbox was just blowing up. I think there's one question toward the bottom of the mailbag today from YouTube, but everything else is on email. So thank you, all of you emailers, for sending us questions for this mailbag today. Great stuff. We start off with Michael on email, who references the show Peyton's Places. This is Peyton Manning. Peyton and Jeff Daniels in 2022 attempted to reverse the curse of Bobby Lane by using a bathtub full of whiskey, which was Bobby Lane's favorite drink. He is a former Detroit Lions great. The Lions went to the NFC Championship game in 2023, and so far in 2024 have the best record in the NFL, tied with the Chiefs at 9-1. That's my ad. I think the Lions are going to win the Super Bowl. My ad. Maybe Nebraska should try this with Larry the Cable Guy and a bathtub full of chewed bubble gum, since that is what Bo Pelini is best remembered for. So Michael's suggesting that Bo Pelini put a curse on Nebraska football, which I think has been suggested previously.
I mean, I guess it tracks, 2015. This is the decade of what did the listeners say? The turd rolled up in a
turd and sugar.
Yeah. This is
the decade of turds and sugar.
So this is the turd decade of Nebraska football. I guess I didn't know that Jeff Daniels did this. This is great. Jeff Daniels, the actor.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Peyton Manning, the actor.
Peyton Manning, I guess, the actor now. There maybe needs to be some sort of ritual exorcism as it pertains to Nebraska football. I used to really fight against the idea that there is a curse, but it's hard to ignore. They might have a curse. I don't know. So I'm willing to listen to any and all remedies to this curse at this point.
That was bright. I had to look up this Bobby Lane thing because I was unfamiliar with the curse of Bobby Lane. I just wanted to make sure that Michael wasn't making this up. There's a curse of Bobby Lane. He's a symbol of the jukebox era. I don't know. He put a curse on the Detroit Lions that lasted for 50 years, evidently. Nice. And it's over. I mean, look at them. Look at Dan Campbell. Fired? Well, no. I mean, they broke it. Peyton and Jeff Daniels, they broke the curse with this bathtub full of whiskey. I don't know what they did with the bathtub full of whiskey. I'm going to have to watch the episode. Michael, he sent a link to the episode on the internet. I did not watch it as I put the mailbag questions together, but it was there. It happened. So
okay, yeah.
All right.
I'm my ears are open, man. My ears are open.
Anything that could possibly improve the situation as it is right now. I think Nebraska should be open to it.
The idea for a long time was to have Frank Solich come back, and then he would do obscene things to Lil Red.
Where you were going with that, man? he would, come on, Frank's like 75.
Well, I mean, Frank came back, and I don't think he was able to, get in the same room as Lil Red when he was back.
He did not. I promise you, he did not have any interactions with Little Red when he did come back though, and he did talk about the curse, and he waved his hand and said, "There's no curse. It is gone, and yet Nebraska persists in its current state.
Wrong curse.
Yeah, right. Bo. Got to go after. Got to go Bo. All right. Question from John. He says, I'm optimistic that Dylan Raiola is going to be better long-term because of all the freshman moments this year. However, I think Nebraska would be the same 5-5 if Heinrich Haarberg started all 10 games. Do you agree?
Oh, that's so hard to say. I don't know. I don't know what they would be if Heinrich Haarberg started all the games. Maybe they'd have a better record. I'm not sure.
Possible.
But I also wouldn't categorize what has happened to Dylan Raiola this year as like, oh, well, that's just stuff that happens to freshmen. No, I mean, he's a lot closer to getting swallowed up in the curse than it is freshman moments, like it's been bad for him the last few games. If Heinrich started this, maybe Nebraska would probably be the same team, just in a different way. They'd be running the ball better, obviously, but
I don't know that Heinrich would have made it through 10 games. We saw him get hurt last year, and Nebraska's a similar team around him. It's a totally different team with a different quarterback. I mean, if Heinrich Haarberg was the starting quarterback and Nebraska never landed Dylan Raiola in the portal, or maybe they do land him. I'm sorry, in the portal as a recruit. Then they don't get Nair and Banks through the portal. I mean, we don't know if Corey Barney what his situation is. Like, it's a different team. So would they be 5-5? Maybe. But I don't know that they would trade this scenario for that one.
There probably wouldn't be as much future optimism. If there is still, I don't know, maybe the future optimism is gone as well, but there would be nothing to look forward to, really. So people are kind of still excited about sophomore year Dylan Raiola, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not.
I think so. Follow-up question from Michael, back to Michael, different Michael, I believe, on email. He says, I'm convinced that Marcus Satterfield regressed Dylan Raiola with his abundance of poor play calling. He put the young quarterback in unwinnable situations. Question, how fast can Dana Holgorsen detox Dylan's mind and get his confidence back?
I mean, Marcus Satterfield certainly culpable in the Dylan Raiola regression throughout his freshman season for sure. Don't know that it's exclusively on his shoulders, but certainly played a part. I've said this all week, and I don't know. Like I think they took a step last week against USC. I thought getting him some easier throws, some quicker reads, and quicker looks. Like he still turns down stuff that he doesn't need to turn down. He still doesn't see stuff that he probably would have been seeing at the beginning of the year. But I do think there was some rehabilitation, I guess, in the USC game. And so if you follow on that track, and Nebraska's going to have a chance to win each of these last two games against Wisconsin and Iowa anyway. But they better hope that they get them to a better place, I think, by the time that Iowa game ends. Otherwise, the conversations get really scary.
Yeah, I think it's all very much right here as I point to my head for those of you listening on the podcast platforms. A lot of it is, I mean, there's some physical things that have held him back, but he's got to get his head straight and be in the right frame of mind when he drops back to throw. And I think Dana is a help there. I think his no nonsense attitude can be good for Dylan, the way that they can talk through things. And now that things are starting to slow down a little bit for Holgorsen in comparison to like his first few days on campus, there's more time for the two of them to get together and for Dana to do his thing. He has proven, if he's proven as anything, it's as a play caller, which will help Raiola, and as a quarterbacks coach, somebody who can help quarterbacks. So timeline, best case scenario, Nebraska plays in a bowl game this year and Dylan Raiola is full steam ahead, looking like the quarterback that Nebraska expects and wants him to be, needs him to be as a sophomore in 2025. Let's do one more quick before the first break from Scott in Ontario. Scott first notes that he was happy to see Dana Holgorsen wearing a proper hat over the past week.
Nice.
No visor for Nebraska's OC, as we discussed last week on this episode. Scott then says that it was refreshing and jarring at the same time to hear Holgorsen talk at his press conference on Tuesday about the bad perimeter blocking It's embarrassing, Dana said, and inability of the running backs to run through holes, among other criticisms that he offered. Scott wants to know if we see these statements as more of an indictment on the players or against the assistant coaches who direct those position groups.
Well, as far as the stuff that happens in a game, it's probably a little bit, more the players. But as far as why they haven't been doing these things all year long and why Dana Holgorsen seemingly can create a spark for this offense, down the stretch, and you saw like a little glint of that on Saturday against USC. That's probably a referendum on the coaches and the previous setup that Nebraska had. I think it's probably given everybody everybody else on that offensive staff a bit of a wake up call. Like, hey,
it's a little uncomfortable in the room.
Yeah, totally. That is not a bad thing. We talked about, I think it was yesterday, Mitch. It's he lacks the feelings toward his players that everybody else just naturally has on the staff right now, and it's a shakeup. I think that came at the right time, to be determined on if it will work or if it will create good things for Nebraska. But I think it was a pretty warranted shakeup for something on offense that was getting very, very stale.
That's where I was kind of going with my answer on this is, the question of, is it an indictment against the players or the coaches? I don't think that's the point, because I don't think Dana thinks about it in either terms. I think Dana says what he thinks in the moment. He can be impulsive, and I don't know that he even starts answering a question. Like Matt Rhule's calculated in the way that he answers questions, and he comes into press conferences with things that he knows he's going to say, that he wants to say. And I don't think whether Holgorsen's on the practice field or in a meeting room or he's standing in front of us talking into a microphone, I don't think he has a whole lot of an idea necessarily about most topics, what he's going to say. It's just what comes into his mind based on the question that he was asked or the play that he just watched up on a screen. So he's not out to get an assistant coach. Like if you hear him say, I talked to the running backs coach at halftime and said, hey, those guys have got to be hitting those holes. I don't think that's him wanting to, pass some kind of judgment that we need to evaluate about EJ Barthel. Like he just thinks that and he says it. And it's nice to hear something that's very real and not necessarily calculated.
Yep.
All right. When we come back, we have a question that we're going to answer about coaches challenging penalties. That's next. Okay. Are you missing someone this holiday season and want them to be a part of your festivities from afar? Do your loved ones live across the country? Maybe you want to bridge that distance. If so, if your answer is yes to any of those questions, we've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame that your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone, watch them appear in seconds like it's magic. The setup takes less than a minute. Invite your friends and family members to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or on email. There's no account or subscription required. You just add photos straight from your phone from anywhere. It takes one tap to send a new photo to a frame across the United States of America. It is the fastest way to keep loved ones in the loop. They'll feel much more connected to you, satisfaction guaranteed. We're so confident you'll love Skylight that we offer, but Skylight, they offer a 120-day return policy. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, you can get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframes.com/college. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/college. Get $20 off your first purchase now at skylightframe.com/college.
All right. And I want to tell you a little bit about the FanDuel Sportsbook. Football fans, you can get this season going, if you're new to it, on the right foot with the FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. So the app is fantastic. When you get that hunch in the middle of the game or before the game or at some point during the week, maybe a wild hair hits you. Hey, Nebraska's a 2.5-point favorite against Wisconsin. I like enter team here, Nebraska, Wisconsin, whatever it might be. I like the over. I like the under. You can check out the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Since now we know that there are some people who pay attention to the Lions, they are 10.5-point favorites this weekend against the Chicago Bears. That's a big NFL spread. You could check that out on the FanDuel Sportsbook. And we'll give you a little incentive. New customers, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is a sweet deal. Check out FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman back with you here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. We'll make our picks tomorrow. Yes, it is true. Nebraska is favorites against Wisconsin this weekend. I asked on another podcast I did this week, Mitch, I asked the group, out of Nebraska's 10-game losing streak, just as we go off on a tangent here for a second, in Nebraska's 10-game losing streak to Wisconsin, how many times do you think you've picked Nebraska to win that game? Is it half? Is it more than half?
Yeah, this is a bad habit among Nebraska media. I try not to subscribe to it as much as some others, and I'm kind of struggling a little bit. As I don't know yet what I'm going to pick for this weekend. I would say that like most people in the media have probably picked Nebraska like 6 or 7 times to win. Most in the media around here to win that game, and a lot of them most of them have been single digit spreads.
Totally.
Couple years where Wisconsin was head and shoulders better. I don't know that I've picked it every time, but if I had picked it every time, it'd probably be like 5-5 probably, which is awful considering that Nebraska's 0-10 in those games.
We all expect another close game on Saturday. So we'll see what happens. All right, back to the mailbag. Here is a question from our guy. Says the USC game was just the latest in a string of games where the officiating was so egregiously bad that everyone was talking about it. I have a proposed solution. Give the coaches 1 or 2 challenges a game where they could challenge a penalty that was called or one that wasn't and should have been. How might the game have been different if Rhule could have challenged the 2 obvious pass interferences that were not called?
Yeah, so coaches have challenges in college football in 2024. They get a challenge, and if they win the challenge and they have a timeout left, then you can use another challenge. And if you win them both, then you can use a third challenge as long as it's not in the final 2 minutes of the game. You cannot challenge pass interference.
That's right.
You cannot challenge a lot of things, which is kind of the unfortunate part about the way that the challenge system works in college football. And a lot of times when calls get reversed or overturned, it's like a booth review that's initiated from up above. It is complex, and I understand why Guy asked that question. But I don't think we're going to enter into a situation where coaches will be challenging pass interference. So there was a short time in the NFL where that was instituted, and
horrible.
It was a result of the pass interference that was missed in the Rams Saints. NFC Championship game a few years ago. Just brutal call that cost the Saints an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. So they had to do something, and they instituted this. Yeah, you can challenge pass interference, and it was a mess. No, so you imagine that coming to college where the officials are like seemingly poorly trained in comparison to those NFL refs. No, that's
just think about the stuff that would be getting challenged. I mean, that's exactly what happened in the NFL. It was a complete disaster. It made the games total slogs, and just like, part of something that football in general has done over the last couple of years is they've taken initiatives to make the games move smoother and faster, and they're still finding their way there. Obviously, there's a lot of media timeouts and all these things, but if you got coaches challenging pass interferences and penalties in general, it's not good for the greater good of the sport. The only way that you could do it, or the only thing that you can really do, is ask the officials, as Matt Rhule and Troy Dannon and many others have over the years, is you ask them to get better. And that's it. I mean, and there's going to be some calls that are advantageous to you, and there's going to be some calls that obviously hurt you in a game. Obviously, a bunch of them have hurt Nebraska this year, and it stinks. But I don't know. I just don't think that would be a good thing for football.
No, it'd be terrible. To Guy's point, though, about how he says everyone's talking about it. So this is true. I spoke with somebody in the sport, in college sports here this week, who's important, an important person in college sports. I talked to an important person, and this person began the conversation with this subject of the bad officiating in Nebraska games. So it's known as a talking point out there on the landscape. Let's just say that.
Yeah. All right. Here's Patrick via email. Is it fair to say that Nebraska's most consistent trait is that it plays to the level of its competition? Patrick, so that's one question. Patrick also has this. Matt Rhule is supremely confident in his ability to rebuild a program. However, he has seemed perplexed and frustrated at times. He's trying to find new solutions for these bumps in the road, as though he's not faced similar issues before. Has each rebuild required unique solutions? And is this just another version of that? Or is this rebuild drastically different than the other two rebuilds? That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it'd be a great thing to talk to Matt Rhule about, like in review of this season. So, is Nebraska's most consistent trait that it plays to the level of its competition? It could be, or it could just be that Nebraska's most consistent trait is to be inconsistent.
That's it.
Yeah, that's I think that's fair. I don't know that there's a right answer for that question. Second question, like we could probably do a whole podcast episode about this. I'll just say the challenges are different. When Matt Rhule was at Temple and doing the rebuild, they were cash strapped. They were making a transition into a new conference, into the American, coming out of whatever. I don't know. It was a bad guy. It was where was Temple before the American?
East? Or the
Big East play football? No, it wasn't the Big East. I don't know. We can look it up, but we'll report back on that. And then at Baylor, the challenge there was unlike anything that we've seen in, well, not unlike, but it was unique to the Big 12. It was unique to Baylor, coming off of a terrible scandal. There have been other schools that have come off terrible scandals, but Baylor had a whole unique set of circumstances that Matt Rhule was trying to work through. He followed Jim Grobe in that job in Waco, and Grobe was the guy who just kind of had to take over to like be a caretaker after all of that went down with the sexual abuse and just bad things that were going on in that program. So no, he's not. His challenges have all been different, and they've all required unique solutions.
Yeah, totally. Nebraska is different from both of those jobs. I mean, for a variety of different reasons. You just mentioned a bunch of them. I'll say that, it's different because of the fact of what it is and what it has been. I mean, it's a blue blood college football program. It's a program with a lot of history and tradition. It was a program that Matt Rhule viewed at the time, as a bunch of players that he inherited that could play. And so, he didn't do the roster reset or anything like that. At both of those places, he brought in a lot of young players and played them right away. And, in both of those places, he had one starting quarterback the entire time he was there. It's amazing.
Basically. Yeah.
To think about.
One primary guy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, this is
He's
way
had
different.
4 at Nebraska.
Yeah. And the obvious, you want to have Dylan Raiola for a long period of time, but there's that piece of it, the amount of attention that's on the program. There's just, I think there's been challenges in a variety of different ways, but the biggest one is trying to, get out the mental worms that Nebraska has in its program, and it has for a long time now.
Temple left the Big East in 2013. I swatted that one away because I was like, the Big East was not. They played football in the Big East, but yes, they did. Yeah, of course they did. It was
only 10 years ago. Amazing to think about.
Yeah. Speaking of the Big East, when we come back, just a bit of talk before the big Friday night game in downtown Omaha. Nebraska basketball, Nebraska men's basketball, Nebraska women's basketball, doubleheader, 2 different sites in downtown Omaha. Huskers take on the Creighton Blue Jays. We will talk about that and then get into the rest of the mailbag. That's next. Okay, it is my turn to read an ad here, and I'm going to tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily sports fantasy app with more than 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in. you can win right now up to 100 times your money on Prize Pick with as little as 4 correct picks. That sounds unreal. Like, go try it. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so you stay and play even if one of your players gets injured. Here's how it works. You pick Tyreek Hill, or you pick Amon-Ra St. Brown from the fantastic 9-1 Detroit Lions, who have now become my team based on this podcast. You pick Amon-Ra St. Brown to get 100 yards receiving. That's the number that's up on the app. You say more or less. Maybe you pick Jared Goff to go for 200 yards passing, more or less, probably more if that's the number. Try Josh Allen or CeeDee Lamb or whoever it is. Set your lineup, sit back, count your winnings. Download Prize Picks, the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's Locked On College on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, welcome back on this Thursday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I am Mitch Sherman. Connor Happer is here. Friday, tomorrow, we're going to be making picks for this is week 13 in college football. The 2 byes are past in the past. Nebraska's in its 11th game of the year. Huskers, of course, will host Wisconsin at Memorial Stadium, 2:30 p.m. Central on Saturday. We got big noon at Ohio State for the Indiana Hoosiers. They're playing to stay undefeated. One of these teams is going to be knocked out of the Big Ten championship race on Saturday. And then, of course, we'll go around the country. Also on Friday this week, as I mentioned, Nebraska basketball is in downtown Omaha to face the Creighton Blue Jays. That is correct. It's Friday night in downtown Omaha. Yeah. Yep. So it's Jayskers week. Jayskers week around the state of Nebraska. Had some. We
love the chatter during Jayskers week. We love the chatter, and it comes at a fun time this year because Nebraska football is still playing. Usually, it comes after their season is completed and they're not going to a bowl game or whatever. At least it has been for a long time now. And you know, the two fan bases have gone in divergent paths by then. Right now, they're all still, you know, sort of together. In fact, Nebraska plays the next day at home against Wisconsin in an important football game. So yeah, the conversation is always very, very funny.
Fred Hoiberg weighed in on Wednesday.
Yeah. Yeah. What did he have to say?
He said that it was, to paraphrase, it's interesting to see all of the fans at the CHI Center who are on opposite sides on Friday night, and then they all come together to cheer for the football team the next day.
That's what I would say if I was the Nebraska coach as well, you know?
Yeah, right. It's a take. You know, Fred is such a nice guy that I don't think there are other Nebraska coaches in the past who I think would have been roasted for saying that, but you can't dislike Fred Hoiberg. You really just can't.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to the end of this mailbag podcast episode. So Patrick on email. No, we got to Patrick. Mitch in Grand Island, frequent emailer of the show. Thank you, Mitch. Good to hear from you. He says, I'm feeling pretty good about the defense going up against a couple backup QBs in the next 2 weeks. Iowa's on its 5th string quarterback. I'm adding that in.
Well, they're back to like their 1st string quarterback, but he was
Cade McNamara. Yeah. Don't believe Cade McNamara. He's not going to. No, they're not. They're not really. Like, don't expect to see Cade McNamara in the Hawkeyes' final 2 games. I'll just leave it at that. So Mitch says, can Nebraska score just enough points for the Huskers to win at least one of these games?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I don't think it would be hard to convince yourself that Nebraska is going to win both of these games. I don't see what's so difficult about, getting that through. It's you're going to have to finish drives and score enough points. The thing is, in these 2 games, you're going up against some offenses that are, they're just not as prolific as the ones that you have seen recently. So that'll be a nice reprieve. We'll see if the defense can get back on track and hold them down. It might only take 20. Nebraska scored 20 against USC. It wasn't enough. It might only take 20 this week against Wisconsin or next week against Iowa. So yeah, if you pick Nebraska to go 2-0 in their next two games, I would not fault you for it. I would not shame you for it at all.
It was interesting to hear Matt Rhule after the USC game and talking about the style of play. And he said, this is the new Big Ten. And he's talking about how Nebraska, when it had opportunities in the red zone against the Trojans in the second half on Saturday, had to turn those opportunities into touchdowns, and how those were missed opportunities, got a couple of field goals from John Hole, but 6 points. If it's 14, that's a different game at the end. And you put pressure on USC, you probably win that game if you get two touchdowns in those two opportunities. And he said it's not like the old Big Ten West, which is funny that now Nebraska's going back into the old Big Ten West for the final two games of the regular season. And I think you're going to see a couple of games that look like Big Ten West games. So,
yep.
Yes,
there's some weather potentially involved in these games. Yeah, it'll be Big Ten football.
Yeah, Nebraska can score just enough points to win at least one of these games. Can score enough to win both these games.
No doubt.
From Scott on YouTube. Here's our YouTube question, our one YouTube question of the episode. Has the John Butler experience been a failure?
Boy, he's taken some heat over the last couple of weeks as the public chatter about Nebraska's defensive backfield has sort of heated up a little bit. I don't think so. I think it's a little brash to call it a failure. Those guys haven't been good back there. That's for sure. So who do you put that on? I don't know. Matt Rhule said, "Hey, look, if you're the cover 2 safety, we expect you to play cover 2." Is that a John Butler thing? Is that a Tony White thing? Is that the player thing? I tend to think it's more of the player thing. A guy who's been around for a long time. But no, I don't think it's been a failure, but it hasn't quite connected there. It doesn't seem.
It's tough to put that on the coach, but can be a scapegoat. And I think that's sometimes that's what people look for in these kind of situations. John Butler faced a challenge. And I think people were confident that when he came, remember, this was around the 4th of July when Evan Cooper left Nebraska football. This is 4th of July weekend. And Butler didn't get to Lincoln for a couple of weeks after that, just before preseason camp opened. That is awfully hard to learn your personnel and to learn a defense. And he's had some things that he's brought with him defensively that I think if they had a longer time in the lead up to the season would have meshed better with Tony White. So I'm not going to say it's been a failure, but Nebraska's secondary has been a disappointment this year in many instances, including that game on Saturday at USC, which might have been the worst performance of the year by the secondary. All right, finally, last question of the show. We won't take long on this one. I want an apology to Chris on email. He sent this in on November 13th after we recorded the show last week, and he says, do you think Rhule, always talking about how every game is going to come down to the end and how we have to make one more play, is detrimental to the team? It seems to me like we accept that as a reality of every game and don't enter into each game believing in our abilities to blow out the competition.
It's interesting. Because I've thought about that a lot over the last couple of weeks as well. Did we talk about this today on my show or Wednesday on my show, Mitch?
I feel like I've talked about this 2 or 3 times this week, which is why I want to apologize to Chris because I didn't steal your idea. Like I thought of that when I heard Rhule say on Monday that this is going to come down to the wire. And I thought, why does it have to come down to the wire? And I think I verbalized that here. And I just totally stole Chris's idea. Sorry.
Yeah.
Without seeing it.
I don't think that's the intent of what he's trying to say. He's
taking him too literally.
He's trying to get his players to, rise to the occasion in the big moments. Like that's it. That's the simple, I think, answer of what he's trying to get to. But they have been conservative at times when they've had opportunities to stomp out opponents, and that has not been good. Do they do that exclusively because they want it to be a close game in the fourth quarter? Like, no, I think if they were good enough to stomp out opponents, then they would have stomped out some more opponents throughout the year. So I'm with you. It's a little too literal there.
Yeah, those things are not connected. Nebraska's lack of killer instinct, I do not believe, is connected to the message that Matt Rhule sends to expect close games. Like he's saying, hey guys, we need to be prepared to be in a 4-quarter battle. And there's nothing wrong with that message.
Yep.
All right. That's it for this edition of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. We'll be back, as we said, on Friday to give you our picks, predictions, props for the weekend. Thank you for making this show your first listen today. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Craig, the host of that show, he puts the Big Ten first. Find the Locked On Big Ten podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts.